What is going on, everybody? TJ here with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports to help bring you the edge for this 8-game NBA slate. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will be covering all of my favorite cash plays and just kind of breaking down the injury news and the matchups that we have on this 8-game slate. But before we go ahead and dive into that, I do want to touch base on a giveaway that Matt and I will be doing going forward every single Friday. The way it will work is we'll be giving $25 out to one lucky commenter on our YouTube channel on one of the videos that we post throughout the week. So for today's video, I want you to go ahead and if you'd like to be entered in this giveaway, again, $25 giveaway, all you have to do is once I post this video in the comments, go ahead and tell me your favorite cash play for tonight's 8-game NBA slate. Simple as that. And if you do that, you're entered into the contest. One other thing, actually, to be fully entered, you need to make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you need to make sure you like the video as well. So if you can do those three things, go ahead and comment your favorite cash play for me on tonight's slate and you will be entered into the giveaway on Friday. And we're going to be doing this going forward, $25. And also make sure you're subscribed to the channel and like the video as well. It really helps out the channel also, so thank you guys. So yeah, we have 8 games on tap for tonight. So let's go ahead and touch base on the matchups and the over-unders that we currently have. We got the Knicks on a back-to-back playing against Philly. Philly currently 4-point favorites. We got a 210.5 over-under right now. We have the Nets and the Bulls. The Nets on a back-to-back. The Bulls currently at home. 1.5-point favorites. We got the over-under currently at 216. We have the Timberwolves and Memphis. Memphis 6-point home favorites, a 217 over-under right now. That's actually come up from a 212 over-under, which is pretty crazy. We got the Pelicans and the Mavs. The Mavs 9-point home favorites. We got a 210 over-under right now. We have Miami and we have Denver. Miami currently 2-point road favorites, and we have a 205.5 over-under, which is the lowest that we have on the slate. Some good value from that game, though, on the Denver side that we will get to. We have Atlanta and we have Golden State. Golden State on a back-to-back, 3.5-point home favorites. We got a 222 over-under. We have the Phoenix Suns and the Sacramento Kings. The Kings on a back-to-back. Phoenix currently 3-point road favorites and a 225 over-under. And then we have Charlotte and the Lakers. Charlotte again on a back-to-back. The Lakers currently 2-point favorites without LeBron and a 226 over-under. So those are the matchups that we have. Let's go ahead and touch base on the injury news that we are still pending. The Knicks are fully healthy. We had Kemba sit yesterday. He was out for rest because they were on a back-to-back, obviously, so he will play tonight against Philly. Philly, we still don't have Tobias Harris and Thibault, and we are pending Danny Green. So if Danny Green sits, that's just a ton more minutes for some of those cheaper Philly guys, so something to keep an eye on throughout the day. Brooklyn, we just have Claxton, who's been out. Chicago, same pitcher, Kobe White and Patrick Williams. Minnesota, we are pending D'Lo, who did miss last game, so that's something to keep an eye on. Memphis, no new injuries. Dylan Brooks has been out all year. The Pelicans in Dallas, we have Brandon Ingram, who is questionable. He hasn't played in about 4 or 5 games, so something to keep an eye on if he does decide to sit, or if he sits again. Pelicans 1-9. What a brutal start to their year. Herb Jones also questionable as well. Dallas, same situation. Kleba is out again. We do have Porzingis back in the lineup for them. Miami, no new injury news. Denver is the big news for tonight. We have Michael Porter out, so there's some good value there for Denver. Atlanta, Collins is going to be good to go, so no new injury news for Atlanta. Golden State, same situation, just Iguodala out. Phoenix, we did get news that Ayton will sit tonight against Sacramento, so that does obviously give some additional value there to some of those Phoenix guys. Sacramento, no new injury news. Charlotte, same situation, just P.J. Washington, who's been out. And then for the Lakers, obviously we have the news that LeBron should be out for the foreseeable future. And then Anthony Davis, questionable. He only played 7 minutes in the game on Saturday. He left because of a illness, apparently, a stomach issue going on. And then they got the doors blown off. And now he's questionable with a thumb injury. So he had been playing through it. I think he'll be good to go. But if he's still sick or the thumb is still bothering him and he does sit against Charlotte, then that's going to open up a ton of value there for the Lakers. Or maybe it won't because they'll just get, their doors blown off. So I want to first and foremost start here with Denver. I'm not going to go game by game because we are still obviously pending a ton of injury news. Oh, sorry, I just got an update on Chase Edmonds, who left the game on Sunday. But yes, Denver is where I want to start. So we have Michael Porter Jr. out, and we don't have a very big sample size. But in a limited sample size that we do have, as you can see, these are the minutes for the sample size that I ran with Michael Porter Jr. off the floor just this year. I am going to go back and do or run some other numbers for how it kind of looked this year and last year with Michael Porter off the floor. But if we're looking at this right now, Jokic gets an 8.2% usage bump and is a 2.35 fantasy point per minute in 65 minutes on the floor without Michael Porter Jr. A 39% total usage. I have him pegged for 84 DraftKings points. Now, I obviously don't think that will happen in a low over-under here against Miami, but I do think Jokic is going to be cash viable here, even with the price tag of $11K. I know the game script that we should see, two teams that can play defensively, especially on the Miami side of the ball. But regardless, with no Michael Porter being on the floor, like, it does open up some really good plays here. Jokic being one of them. My next, who's probably going to be my favorite cash lock, is going to be Will Barton at $5,500. He gets a 2.8% usage bump. He's a 1.04 fantasy point per minute. He becomes that real second option behind Jokic, and that's in an 85-minute sample size. So I have him for 6.2 value, 34 DraftKings points. I don't have any ownership yet because I'm doing this early in the morning, but I assume Will Barton will be toward the top here in terms of ownership. So I love Barton. Aaron Gordon, $4,900. He's a 0.94 fantasy point per minute. I think he'll carry some ownership as well. But I'm really looking at Jokic and Barton, even though this game isn't too appealing here with the over-under that we currently have. But that's kind of where I'm looking at right now for Denver. I think Monty Morris should see some ownership at $4,100, but then you have so many other just backup options with Dozier and Campazzo, And then we also have JaMychal Green, Jeff Green, who should see some time. These guys are all going to be more tournament plays for me. I don't think I'd land on any of these in cash for Denver because I just don't trust the minutes. As you can see, they're all projected high teens, low 20s in terms of minutes. So I think for cash builds, you can definitely get Jokic in a cash build, but I think Barton is the guy that you're definitely going to want at $5,500 if you are building and looking for some value here for Denver. Next, I want to go to Philly. Again, in another low over under, the second lowest that we do have on the slate, but there should be a lot of good Philly value tonight against the Knicks, especially if we see a guy like Danny Green miss again in his 26 to 28 minutes. I want to go ahead and take a look at the popcorn machine from last game. So this was where we had Tobias out, Danny Green, and Thibault. We had an 8-man rotation. As you can see, we had Georges Niang come off the bench and get 25 minutes. Korkmaz shot, he was lights out. He played 32 minutes there. Milton played 36 minutes. Tyrese Maxey, 44 minutes. I mean, he's played Tyrese Maxey over his last two games, 44 and 45 minutes. He's just continuing to be on the floor in these types of situations. So if he's a guy that's going to play 42 minutes, like, I honestly don't hate landing on him as a last piece. I have a little bit more interest in a guy like Milton if he does start. I think he takes away from Maxey, rightfully so, because he would start at the 1. Joel Embiid played 34 minutes. We got Paul Reed with the start, played 22 minutes. He was okay. He had 10 points, 5 boards. And then we had Seth Curry play 33 minutes. So if we're in the same type of situation where we do have Danny Green out, I do have some interest here in these Philly guys. It's going to be Milton at $5,200. I think he's going to accrue a ton of ownership. And then Korkmaz again at $4,900. If he's going to continue to play 30 minutes, even if he's not starting coming off the bench, I do think he's viable at $4,900. So the cheap options for me are going to come from this Philly side, and it's going to come from these Philly guys. But I do want to wait and see what goes on with Danny Green and the hamstring injury. Obviously, like I said, Thibault is out. Tobias is out, but if Danny Green does miss, it does open up some value here with Milton, Korkmaz, even potentially Niang at $4,600. So those are the two teams that I'm looking at right now. I think in terms of cash, I would probably be looking at Phoenix next, and that is because we did get news that DeAndre Ayton will miss tonight with the leg injury. If Frank Kaminsky starts, they've been using McGee starting over these last couple games. He got into some pretty big foul trouble against Atlanta, so Kaminsky came off the bench and was absolutely nails. If he's going to play even 22 minutes, Fantasy Cruncher right now has him for 20. I think he plays north of that. I put him for 22 just to be safe at $4,300 with no Ayton on the floor. He's a 1.1 fantasy point per minute. I have him for 5.63 value, 24 DraftKings points. So I do really like Kaminsky. I think he's going to carry some ownership. He's going to be one of the chalkier plays on the slate. And then McGee, if he can stay out of foul trouble, this matchup against Sacramento is a very good one. So I'm looking at potentially playing one of these two guys. I want to see who starts. I would assume it's JaVale. But I wouldn't hate another build where you're potentially getting Kaminsky and McGee in your lineups. I think both of them have some upside in the matchup against Sacramento. They're both very cheap. And it's on a slate where we don't really have too much cheap value currently. So I wouldn't mind going to those two guys. Kyle Anderson is another cheap option. And if you go ahead and look at my sheet here, Kyle Anderson at $4,200, a 0.95 fantasy point per minute. So far on the year, I have him pegged for 23 DraftKings points. Him and Steven Adams are the two best values that I have currently for Memphis. Steven Adams at $4,500, a 1.02 fantasy point per minute. So if you're landing on one of these two guys for value as well, I wouldn't hate it. But there isn't too much value currently on this slate right now. I think the biggest thing that people are going to have to keep an eye on is the Danny Green news, because I think it opens up some pretty good cheap value here. In terms of other value that I'm looking at, I don't really have too much interest elsewhere in terms of cash right now. And again, that's very likely to change because we don't have ownership. If D'Lo sits, that's going to open up some really good value for guys like Pat Bev. If he's going to start, Malik Beasley would become a more interesting play at $4,600. Excuse me, he becomes cash viable. And then again, Patrick Beverley, I think he would become cash viable because he would see an uptick in those minutes. Currently projected at 20. If he does start at the 1, if D'Lo does sit against Memphis, at $4,300, he'd probably play around 28 minutes. He'd become a cash option as well. So that's where I'd be looking again. But monitoring the injury news this early in the morning and in the day, and making sure you're staying on top of that is going to be big. So again, Danny Green, we need to wait and see what goes on with him. D'Lo, again, that opens up some value. Brandon Ingram would open up some value against Dallas. I would be worried about a blowout here. The Pelicans have been brutal. But Josh Hart would become a more interesting play for me at the 3 there. And outside of that, I didn't even talk about the Lakers situation. They were... When AD left they were horrible against Portland. It was 105-90, but that score doesn't do justice. They were down, 30 going into the fourth quarter or something like that. It was absolutely atrocious. I think Westbrook's going to carry some ownership because I do like this matchup here against Charlotte. Should be high scoring. Charlotte's played at an insane pace so far this year. And if you take LeBron off the floor, I have Westbrook projected for 51 DraftKings points, and I have Anthony Davis projected for 53. So if the Lakers are going to stay competitive in games without LeBron, it's going to fall heavily on Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook. So I personally like Jokic a little bit more right now without Michael Porter Jr., but if you're landing on an AD or a Westbrook, I think they're going to carry some ownership. I think people are going to gravitate more toward Jokic, but I wouldn't hate going to a Westbrook. And if AD sits, again, that's going to open up a ton of value. So that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you could, please smash that like button. Make sure you're following the channel and have that notification bell on. Matt and I might be doing a live stream tonight for NBA, and if we do, we'll have updated ownership. We will have updated numbers, obviously, and we should have some injury news, especially with Danny Green, hopefully D'Lo, before the slate actually kicks off. So be able to get a better gauge as to where we'll be going in tonight's 8-game slate. So with all that being said, good luck, guys, and let's cash.